Welcome back to Mean Streets, where each week we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And we are your cinematic sleuths. Today's case is 1971's Shaft. You dig? The film stars Richard Roundtree as Shaft, and Moses Gunn and Charles Cioffi, Christopher St. John, and Lawrence Pressman. It was written by Ernest Tidyman and John D.F. Black and directed by Gordon Parks. The logline for Shaft. the IMDb logline is: a crime lord hires black private eye John Shaft to find and retrieve his kidnapped daughter. You dig, Matt? Shaft.
I dig. Do you dig?
I do. But before we dive in, just to let everyone know, hey, if you like what we do, review us on Apple and Spotify, and hang out with us on Blue Sky and other places, because it's always good to do that. But that's all the housekeeping stuff. Let's dive into Shaft, because I don't know about you, I've always known of Shaft, and I've seen some of the latter films. This is the first time I've seen Shaft 1971, so I went in knowing very little, other than I know that he is a black private eye, and Isaac Hayes is famous for writing that theme song. That was all I knew of Shaft going in. But I found myself loving bits of this, and then laughing hysterically at other bits of this. But generally having a good time watching it. What's your, I don't know, experience with Shaft?
Well, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I also, the one thing this film is entertaining, and
yes,
it's exciting, but it is laugh out loud funny. For all the academic stuff you could say about it, the one thing that the foundation of it is just one damn entertaining film on almost every level. I don't remember. I had seen it before, but I've never read any of the books, interestingly. But so I've nothing to compare it to in terms of the literary heritage of it.
Sure.
But the fact that it's written by Tidyman, who also writes the books, which we'll get onto later on, makes me hope that it's fairly grounded in what the books are and fairly faithful to what the books do. If I'm wrong, let me know. I don't remember the first time I saw this, but I had seen it before a couple of times. But as with a few films we've covered on this podcast over the years, it was good to revisit something. It was good that that you'd not seen for a fair few years. It's good with different perspectives and different points of view.
Yes.
But one thing that didn't change was this was an absolute riot. It's a blast of a film.
You mentioned.
So I was just going to say, I think Roundtree is a really solid piece of glue that holds it together. Roundtree
is fantastic.
Yeah, no denying it.
I agree. He was very, very fun. You mentioned, you're asking, is this anything like the book? I got the book.
Ah, well, there you go.
I got the book.
And is that the movie poster that is the cover?
It is. It's the Bloomsbury original novel film classic. So they've used the film poster, and it's a really, honestly, it's shit. This is one of the worst covers I've seen, because it's just slapping weird, look at the back of it, people listening can't see at home, but it's just this weird poorly zoomed in frame of the text on the poster, hotter than Bond, cooler than a bullet, which two things. I'll get back to this Bond comment in a second, but you mentioned, is it anything like the book? And the opening is exactly the same. It's Shaft walking through New York City and stuff, but the pros, I think, are just, they sort of crack me up, because he's talking about all the smells and things that he's smelling and things that he's seeing.
Is it first person?
No.
Right.
here I live this line I think kind of sums it up. And he said he had been digging it all the way, digging it, walking fast and thinking mostly about the girl. She was crazy, freaking beautiful, crazy. That's page 1, baby. That's page 1.
So the film is like the book.
The film is like the book, and what I mean by that is the film is like the book in that, in many ways, it clearly feels like two white guys trying to write African American lingo and
of the 70s. Yeah,
of the 70s.
That's one of the very sort of definite senses you get from this.
Now, I had to look this up because I always look up who writes this stuff, and I always look up who the authors are. I laughed my ass off when I saw a picture of Ernest Tidyman. I thought, okay,
he looks like Stan Lee.
He does look like Stan Lee. He does. He looks like Stan Lee, and I just thought this guy.
Yeah, he looks like an accountant. He's got a 1970s sort of swept over comb over hairdo, big glasses and a mustache, and what looks like a sort of corduroy tie in the picture I've seen of him.
Yes.
And a suit. You know, he doesn't look like anybody that knows what the streets of Harlem are like. The mean streets of Harlem are like.
No. But I mean, he's got good credits to his name. The French Connection is another very
French
big
Connection.
film.
The French Connection, yeah. And I know that. Just brief aside, I know that William Friedkin, had to rewrite a lot of the French Connection script that Tidyman had done, but insisted that for essentially a novice, the script was good enough that Tidyman's name went first.
Right.
So he's got something, I think he's one of those who's got something that perhaps just needed to nurture or be nurtured,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of similar atmosphere in this film in The French Connection, which
a lot,
and the way it comes across and the way it moves and the way it sounds stupid, but the way it smells, the way it, the whole sense, the whole assault on your senses this film has is very similar to The French Connection.
Yeah, I found.
And I was also surprised. Sorry, just one more thing. I was also surprised to see that Tidyman did I must have known this and forgotten it, but he did the script for High Plains Drifter.
Yeah,
which I think is one of the better westerns of the Clint Eastwood cycle.
Yeah.
So he has got a good bit of pedigree. A lot of unproduced screenplays, but what he got made, some of it was really good.
Yeah. No, but back to your point about French Connection, I agree. One of the big things I really liked about this film were the visuals. I love dirty 1970s New York. I just love it. It's one of my favorite things about Superman the movie is that it's not Metropolis, it's dirty 1970s New York.
Yeah.
Or when I think about even like the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's dirty, wet streets, graffitied New York, and I love that vibe. It's like when I see New York in movies and shows today, it's too clean, it's too nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Although one show that retains a sort of gritty New Yorkness is Daredevil, that's a good one. It's a good one. But I kept thinking about French Connection as I was watching this because both of these parallel, and that sort of the way they perfectly capture just this seedy, greedy, greasy, dirty, smelly, claustrophobic New York City, and I loved every bit of that.
And I'll tell another film that we've covered that I thought about in those opening scenes was Get Carter.
Yes,
because the very same applies to Get Carter.
Definitely.
This is an absolute social commentary. We mentioned on the show on Get Carter with Nick Triplo that it's almost a sort of documentary feel.
Yes.
To it, and I got the same sense with this, that when Shaft is walking through those streets as the credits are rolling, there's nothing there that looks staged. It's just a bloke walking through the streets as they were at the time.
Yes,
and it's a time capsule of 1970s New York, and it's all the better for it. It's all the better for it.
I agree. I totally agree. Now, earlier, I had two things to say, and one was based on what was on the back of this book that says "hotter than Bond." Um, there are definitely. I mean, this is 1971. Connery's Bond is come and gone. I think, right?
Yeah, well, you've depended on the month. You've probably just had Diamonds Are Forever, or you
Diamonds
just
Are
about
Forever.
to get
Okay, right. Diamonds Are Forever was around the same time. Okay, yeah. So yeah, you've had Lazenby, you've had Connery, Diamonds Are Forever. So that is kind of the end of Bond of that era of Bond, about to enter the terrible Roger Moore era, in my opinion. But I couldn't help but feel a bit of Bond influence, not just in the way Shaft is getting off with women left, right, and center, digging those girls with groovy boobs. But even in the opening title sequence, during the credits, the song, it was like a like if Bond, I don't know, it just had that sort of Bond vibe to it. But if Bond was streetwise, private eye, working in a black part of New York City.
I know what you're saying, and one of the one of the girls that Shaft does have a liaison with has a great line where she says, "You're great in the sack, but you're shitty afterwards."
Yes,
and like that's Bond. That is Bond, isn't it?
Yes,
very much so. So yeah, there is it didn't strike me as strongly as it maybe struck you, but there's definitely a Bond vibe there. And Bond, of course, was in pretty much no man's land at the minute because Connery had said, right, no more.
Yeah.
And Moore hadn't signed. So, and it's interesting that the first Moore film we get is essentially a blaxploitation film.
Yes.
So
yes.
You've got Shaft being influenced by Bond and possibly Shaft influencing Bond in a couple of years' time. Because this is one of the films that started all that off.
Yeah, that's actually what we should probably talk about because, this is definitely a neo-noir, but it is one of the first blaxploitation films out there. And it's interesting. So Spike Lee, the director Spike Lee, he cites this film as one of his big inspirations. He's quoted as saying, "You get inspiration where it comes from. It doesn't have to be because I'm looking at this film. The odds that he," meaning Gordon Parks, got these films made under when there were no other black directors is enough." And I think he raises a really interesting point because this film has been dissected all sorts of different ways on masculinity, sexuality, its representation of like the black experience of the time and how accurate or inaccurate that is. But I feel like Spike Lee has a very good point here, and that is just the fact that this film exists is something to, in many ways, even though it's problematic in places, it's still worth celebrating because it gave someone like Roundtree an opportunity to be the action hero. And because I think if I remember right, the film was initially going to have Shaft be white, even though he's black in the book. The book came first, but they were going to make him white in the film.
Tiedeman's first draft had him as a white character, and it was Parks who said no. It was Parks who vetoed it, and I think then the producer got behind Parks. But yeah, it's interesting that Tiedemann creates. And why would you do it? Well, we can discuss why you do it, but he creates a black hero for the novel, and then seems to get sort of cinematic cold feet when he comes to do the script, presumably because he thought Hollywood wouldn't buy it.
See, this is what I would love to find information on, because I could almost see it being that he spoke to producers who said, "Great, but you're gonna have to make him a white guy."
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I mean. That he, and Hollywood does this, doesn't it? Adaptations do this. They say, "Yeah, this is fine, but this change has got to happen to make it sellable." So that's not an uncommon thing. But I think it would have been a terrible. It would have made it just another generic action film that would have been lost to the mist of time, presumably.
Yes.
Because, and also if you look at what came before, we and really what was coming out around the same time, we've had Paul Newman as Harper that we've covered in the previous episode. That's a tough act to follow 4 years down the line, 4 or 5 years down the line.
Yeah.
And because he's white, if you make Shaft white, you're gonna you're gonna inevitably draw comparisons, aren't you? And similarly, around the same time, Dirty Harry's about to arrive. So Shaft could easily have just sort of disappeared under the weight of those. And of course, Popeye Doyle in The French Connection, there's your tough white cop.
Yes.
In a Tidyman script. Why doesn't Shaft doesn't need to be changed? And it's all
No.
And to me it's absolutely vital that he isn't changed. And this film is a lot better because he wasn't changed than it might otherwise have been. But it's a strange choice to make. It's a strange decision to make.
It is. It's interesting also because when Tidyman was going to write the book, it was, I can't remember the man's name, but there was a literary agent at the time who was one of the few black literary agents who actually suggested Tidyman write this book, which is something else that I find very interesting. I just find that interesting. That of all the people that they would pick this white guy to write this book about a black guy.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I guess this raises all those complicated questions of who should be able to write what and how and da. And I've always been of the opinion that as long as your book is well researched and your story is well researched and feels authentic, then I have no problem with it. I guess I question some of the authenticity of Shaft. Dig all these cats.
Yeah, all these cats. Everybody's a cat, and I find, and it's interesting to me that Antonio Fargas is in this, who later became world famous as Huggy Bear, in Starsky and Hutch, and he's almost walked off the Shaft set 7 years later, as if they still, 7 or 8 years later, whatever it is, as if they still think that's how the black community in Harlem was talking, and you're right. We still have this debate even today, don't we? 40 odd years on, about whether you can write another sort of gender or another ethnicity, if you are not from it or you are not one of them.
Yeah.
And I think today, if somebody wrote a book like this today and made a film like this today, and they were white, I reckon they get some criticism for it, don't you?
I think that is safe to say. The literary agent was Ronald Hobbs. That's the man who recommended that Tidyman do this. He was the one who it's just interesting.
He is an odd choice though. He's a strange choice to write this book and this screenplay. There's no getting away from that. I mean, the old writing thing of write what you know, whether you accept that or not, I question how much Ernest Tidyman knew about what he was writing. Not much, I reckon. But I
don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. But what is also interesting is that so he sold the movie rights. Tidyman sold the movie rights to Shaft by showing the galley proofs to studios.
Yeah.
So the novel hadn't yet been published. This stuff happened really quick. Like he was writing the book, sold the rights, book comes out, and then very quickly the film comes out. So it's
within
all
a year.
Yeah.
Within a year of each other. Yeah.
Quick. Mean Streets will return right after this. Who doesn't love a good boxing movie? Well, Steve Hunt presents the Boxing Movie Podcast. On each episode, Steve and his guests discuss a movie that has boxing as a theme. Do not be put off if you're not a fan of boxing, though. Of course, he covers the likes of Rocky and the sequels, but the depth of boxing-themed movies across cinema history is much greater than you might imagine. Boxing Movie Podcast has covered the early works of Hitchcock, explored the world of blaxploitation cinema and the golden age of film noir, with episodes covering The Setup, Champion, and Stanley Kubrick's Killer's Kiss.
you might not have previously considered yourself a boxing movie fan, but after listening to a few episodes of the Boxing Movie Podcast, you may have to reconsider that view. Find the Boxing Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
If you love Mean Streets, join us on Patreon and get exclusive perks, insider access, and a chance to shape the show.
Depending on the tier of your choice, get early episode access, your name in the credits, and have your questions read on air.
You can help us choose films for us to review, unlock exclusive commentaries and reviews, and join our members-only YouTube Live Q&As.
So slip on your trench coats, pull your fedoras down, and join us on Patreon today.
Now, back to the show. But I find it interesting that Tidyman was honored by the NAACP for the work of his work on Shaft, both in the movies and the books. So, I mean, the thing is, I think this is what Spike Lee was sort of getting at, is that like, hey, like this film was an important film because it allowed for representation, positive representation. Shaft is a cool, positive. Generally, he's a misogynistic guy. He's sleeping around, but he's not dishonest in terms of and I guess in terms of misogyny, like he's sleeping around, but we don't know what the film. I'm jumping all over the place here. I know this. The film is very unclear as to the commitment level of him and his partners in the way that Bond is, and this is why it says hotter than Bond. Yeah, because it's like he's got a quote girlfriend ish, but we don't really know how committed they are.
No,
you know, that's it's the 70s. Right. People are sleeping around. You know, it's falling into that kind of mindset, I think, which adds to. It's interesting, but also adds, I guess, problematic interpretations and themes to this film. But that aside, let's put that aside. Put that in the box. Like Shaft is a cool guy. He's a cool guy. He's an honest guy. He is educated. Like the scenes in his not his office, but his apartment. I loved his apartment. It's a nice little apartment in New York. It's very much made me think of the Jeffersons. Have you ever watched the Jeffersons?
Yeah.
Moving on up to the east side. It sort of reminded me a little bit of like that kind of mindset, and his shelves stacked with books, stacked with records. He's a smart, well-read, intelligent, capable
guy. Yeah, and he's a rounded character. You know, he isn't. There's no attempt to glorify him, and there's no attempt to make him appear sort of Dudley Do Right heroic.
Yes,
he's a man who does a dirty job. He's what noir PIs should be. He's a man who's trying to make a living, who has a code of honor that is his, and he knows what he can do with it and how far he can push it. But he has to deal with people's problems and some nasty blokes along the way.
Yeah,
whether they're the police or criminals, and he has to walk a line between the two of them. And, you know, as an aside, almost, he's black. You know, in the same way we talked about Easy Rawlins in Devil in a Blue Dress. You know, there's a big racial theme going through that of how Rawlins is treated and stuff. But as a character, it's totally unimportant what the color of his skin was. In terms of him as a character, you know, as him as a character, as a PI, how others treat him and view him, that's a different issue. Okay. But in terms of a protagonist, you know, he is just what you want a protagonist to be. I think that's what I'm really.
As you're saying, yeah, I follow.
And the same goes for Shaft. You know, the same goes for Shaft. He is what I want a PI to be in a film of this type.
Yes,
he's willing to do what he has to do to get the job done. He's not willing to be pushed around.
Yes.
You know, and he's effortlessly cool while he does it. You know, I mean,
he is.
You know, he's cooler than Marlowe.
Oh God,
you know what I mean? And he's cooler than Sam Spade in the sense of being hip, a hip cat.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's good to see. I think it's thoroughly enjoyable to see, and I like to see him taking no crap from these white blokes who want to put him down, and who wants to put him in his place. And he takes none of it. That is brilliant to see, and he's handled so well.
That opening scene. So after we sit through a 5-minute song, it's that 5-minute exposition song written by Isaac Hayes about how cool Shaft is and how all the ladies are weak in the knees around him.
Well, absolutely. We'll come on to this. We'll come on to the music, but despite the fact it's a classic, it was an Oscar-winning song, whatever. I was disappointed when he started singing because I was enjoying the 70s funk guitar.
The music is great. I was listening to the score today, and I love the music. But so my problem with Isaac Hayes is he's colored now by South Park. So if you've ever watched South Park, he is the character who plays Chef, and Chef is always going into song. And it's just Isaac Hayes doing basically Shaft songs.
Yeah.
And so therefore I couldn't take it seriously and I was laughing. But but one more thing we should say about the writing is Don D.F. Black. Again, another white
fella. But, I presume you know him for one particular bit of work, I presume.
Yeah, well, two things. Star Trek.
Yeah.
So he wrote, we got to mention it. He wrote 3-4 very important-ish episodes of Star Trek. One being The Naked Time, which is a very, very famous episode in the original Star Trek series where like the whole crew goes a bit nuts and Sulu is shirtless with his little sword bopping up and down the corridors of the Enterprise. But he's also credited as writing the Menagerie 1 and 2, which is the very famous two-parter that sort of incorporates elements of the unaired first Star Trek pilot with Captain Pike and what happened to him in all the face fucker-uppery. But he also is credited as writing part of the opening monologue, The Final Frontier. But he's done other stuff. He worked on Mission Impossible. He worked on Mannix.
The Fugitive.
The Fugitive, yeah. Like, this guy's a good writer. Like
Hawaii Five-0, I think he did, and Charlie's Angels. All those sort of staple cop shows of my youth.
Yes,
he was in there somewhere.
Yes.
So this bloke's contribution can't be understated.
No,
and he had a massive career. He had a really long career, right up until his death. Really, he's still working on Star Trek, from what I could understand, until about 2015 in various ways.
Yeah, there was some sort of thing that he got a credit for. I don't know. I can't remember what that thing was. I remember it, but I don't think it was anything.
Nothing special, like nothing.
Yeah, it wasn't an episode. It wasn't an episode of something. I think it was just some thing. Don't know.
But if anybody wants to look him up, then Black's filmography, he is constantly working from about 1960, late 1950s maybe. He's constantly working right the way through the 60s and 70s, and into the 80s, doing a lot of decent stuff. I say decent stuff. It's all the sort of TV staple stuff that you would, like, say, Hawaii Five-0 and Murder, She Wrote and stuff like that. But it's a long career. It's a long career.
Yeah.
Deserves a lot of respect.
Definitely. So I guess we can dive into things that we can talk about the story and things we liked about it, and then I suppose things we disliked. But there's a lot that I liked. There's a lot that
I like.
That opening scene where after the 5-minute song, where the cops, Vic is one of the cops, and I can't remember the other cop's name, but they approach Shaft on the street. They want to talk to him about something, and even sort of on a visual level, Shaft is taller than both of them.
Yeah,
and he's not monstrously tall, but he's just a bit taller than both of them. Mm-hmm. And one of the two cops, the one that's not Vic, is a little bit jerky towards Shaft. And after they have a bit of a conversation, Vic and the other cop are leaving, and the other cop's like, "Oh, you got to lean on that kind," and Vic's like,
Yeah.
"You don't lean on that kind." And I think what I liked so much about that is it really set up. There is a nice. I like the relationship, and I like the friendship that is there between Vic and Shaft. I
So
see it
did
as
I.
a friendship. I think there's
Yeah.
a respect that going on there.
Yeah, I saw it as Marlowe and Bernie Oles.
Yeah.
That I could even believe they were mates, proper mates at one point, and then have had to
Yes.
sort of distance themselves from each other for whatever reason, and
Yes.
that now their respective jobs mean that they might have to brush up against each other in an antagonistic way.
Yes.
But underneath all that, there is a friendship still, and there is certainly respect. There is certainly mutual respect, and like I said, that instantly made me think of Marlowe and Oles.
Yeah.
In The Big Sleep, which I think is also a similar type of relationship. But yeah, I thought Vic was great. Vic Andratsy was a great character.
Yes. Yeah. No, I loved most of his scenes, and I liked his frustration, and I liked some of their conversations were maybe a little bit clunky, but I appreciate the sentiment that they were trying to get across at times. It's like there's one moment later in the film where what's his name? Vic calls Shaft. Well, Vic says to Shaft that basically says he's not black enough. And there's this sort of, and he goes, "Well, you're not white enough." Right?
Yeah.
And there's this sort of play on race and trying to, I think, sort of discuss what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be, what does that mean in the context of what we're dealing with?
Yeah.
And does the film handle it well? Does it really go in depth with it? No, it's very surface, but you can generate, I think, conversation and you can think about it. I guess the film isn't meant to be a thesis about maybe race relations in that particular way, but the film is incorporating it or sprinkling it in to maybe to be a bit, is it, to add authenticity, maybe, I don't know, but it definitely generates some thoughts with those moments.
It certainly does, and I agree that it's only a sprinkle, but and I also agree that it's not designed to be a thesis on it. And in many ways, I'm glad about that, because I think we know what the thesis is, by those sprinkles that it gives. And it shouldn't get in the way of what is an exciting story necessarily. I think it's enough to acknowledge that these are, that these issues are in existence and are live and are prevalent. And I think it says a lot about Vic that he is Shaft's mate, and he is his friend, and he's able to have that sort of banter with him, however clunky that is put over, because we know that at the time not every white man will have been like Vicky is towards a black man, so
no,
it's I think they could have done more with it. I'm not saying they couldn't. They could have done more with it, but I think they could easily have overdone it as well.
Yeah.
And you sort of get an unhappy medium of not addressing it at all and overdoing it. It's sort of pitched somewhere in the middle and perhaps isn't quite strong enough one way or the other.
Yeah.
To be as decisive as it might want to be.
Yeah. Whereas I think if we compared this to Devil in a Blue Dress, that handles it superbly. That is very clear about what it's trying to say about certain things and certain people
and certain attitudes. Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's one moment where another character, Willie, calls Shaft Snow White,
Yeah.
Which is that is basically what they're trying to imply from that, is that he's not. There's another black guy calling Shaft Snow White, basically saying he's not black enough, because I think it's sort of the implication is that he's moved up in the world. He's living in a nice part of town. He's got a nice apartment. He's not in where are they? The Harlem? Is that where they're meant to be?
Harlem.
You know, he's not living in that kind of situation anymore. He's moved up.
Yeah, and as if by bettering himself, terrible phrase, but you know what I mean. As if by moving up, he is somehow sold out.
Yeah.
You know, which Shaft himself absolutely refuses to believe. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very much like Easy Rawlins, who just says, "Well, why can't I?
Yeah.
Why am I not entitled to do it?
Yeah,
you know?
I want to own a house, damn it."
yeah. All I want is a house of my own that I can call my own. Well, you know, why should you not be allowed that? And yeah, and so there is that sense of, I mean, they say coconut in other films. They say you're a coconut, you know, brown on the outside, white on the inside.
Yeah,
you know, and there is a feeling of that with Willie, and with other characters, the sort of lesser characters.
Yeah,
and Shaft just rises above it, and you admire him all the more because he just says, "Well, I know." I get the sense that Shaft is a man who knows who he is, and he's comfortable in who he is and what he is and where he's going in the world. And if you don't like it, then I'll see you sometime. You know,
and I'll throw you out the window.
I'll throw you out the window. But there's just a quote I want to raise. This might be a good point to raise. That someone had argued, I can't remember who it is, but somebody had argued that Shaft is a product of the white studio imagination, and merely a black-skinned replica of the white action hero commonly found in the detective genre. Very quickly, do you agree with that?
I think I might have read that. That's an old review from the time, wasn't it?
Yeah. And someone else says he wears clothes and affects manners that are associated with being black. He's stylistically racialized.
Yeah, I think
one's from the African American Review at the time.
Yes. I think, isn't that the one that Gordon Parks responded to and was basically saying, like, you're full of shit, like other people like this movie?
Yeah, I think he might be. Yeah. I think he might. I don't think he said that. Well, I think he might have said it in those words, actually. But
those exact words. He said, "You're full of shit. Other people like this movie."
Yeah.
I remember that review, and I remember thinking, this is where it's so complicated. This is where when you get to these sorts of films and stories and what someone is trying to do, and it's like, yes, I can see why. I mean, we've been joking about the fact that this film is written by two very white guys, and an accountant and a science fiction nerd,
and so and saying this is what we think black people talk like.
Yes. That being said, this film is influenced and has other, it does have, a black lead. It has other black actors. It has a black director. So there must have been input somewhere along the way from some of these other individuals working on the movie. So is what that review saying, is that justified? I mean, maybe in certain respects, I can sort of see why you might go that way. I think that might be a little bit I
think it's a bit simplistic. That's my I think you certainly wouldn't say it if the screenwriter was also black. So it was a black screenwriter and a black director. You wouldn't be able to say it then, I don't think. And I think just because a white bloke wrote, and I think this is what the critic is really getting at. This is a white man's image of what a guy like Shaft would be. But that just seems to write out Parks altogether, and Roundtree, who will have had some input into how Shaft
and Ronald Hobbs, the black literary agent who wanted tied him in to write this book.
They would have all had an input. Yeah, they've all had an input in it, and I think that's just a bit of a dismissive, cynical, and pretty just sort of bad intentioned.
Yeah, I wasn't thrilled with that review. Roger Ebert had an interesting review, which might as well, because we're talking about it, might as well do that now. He says the strengths of Park's movie is his willingness to let the hero fully inhabit the private eye genre, with all of its obligatory violence, blood, obscenity, and plot gimmicks. The weakness of Shaft, I suspect, is that Parks is not very eager to inhabit that world along with his hero. I feel like that one might be a little bit more fair, and that might tap into more what we were saying, and that is there are little moments of sort of race relations and race conversations that are surface, and they don't punch like they could.
I was just going to say that, make that same point. Yeah. Ebert's review there essentially is saying that they don't go far enough.
Yeah.
In making it a black film, and I could go along with that much more than I can go along with that other review. Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense. Ebert makes a lot more sense to me than, I can't remember who it was, but whoever.
Yeah,
it is.
the other guy.
Yeah.
I know what you mean though. I mean, the thing is, this film was a huge success though. I mean, this thing only cost 500 million. 500,000. 500 million. Oh my god. Oh, that's insane. But its box office return was 13 million.
Yeah.
Like, this thing was a sensation.
This is a smash hit. Yeah, absolutely.
At a time when MGM, which was a studio that produced, they were on the verge of struggling from bankruptcy. Like, this film is one of the things that saved MGM from going under entirely.
Definitely. And people, well, obviously the box office returns show, people went to see it in their droves,
Yeah.
And I was just checking, it predates The French Connection, because I
yes, it does. Yes, 75.
Only by a couple of months, I think.
Is it months? I thought French Connection was 75. Maybe I'm very wrong in that.
No, French Connection 71.
Oh, shoot. Maybe the second one is 75?
The second one might be 75. So I'm just making sure that we don't get a whole load of complaints.
71. Yeah, 71.
October 71. So this I think is June 71. And the reason I mention that is because I was thinking, well, if you've already had the French Connection, then you might want more of the same. But in actual fact, the French Connection is more of the same of this.
It is.
If you're going to put it like in those terms. So the reason people went to see this must have been something else. And sometimes audiences want something different, don't they? Sometimes audiences want something they've not seen before, which is another reason I think that it would have been a mistake to have to recast Shaft. As a white guy. I think it would have been a terrible mistake. And I think people would have said, well, it's another white PI. But I think the very fact that he's black, that glimpse into a different lifestyle is a selling point, to an intelligent person, to an intelligent cinema goer. But also, and then you get a really rollicking good ride as well.
You do. But also, I was going to add to that, if you think about it from the perspective of a black person at that time, like, again, you're finally getting a movie where the black guy is the hero. He's not the villain. He's not the thug. He's not the gangster. He's not whatever. Like, Shaft is a cool, honest
man,
dude who's like I said, who's tough, who's intelligent, and I think that is. I've always praised.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've always praised like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, because Captain Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks, who plays the character of Hawk in Spencer for Hire, another fantastic PI show from the 80s. I've always loved that character of Benjamin Sisko, and I've always valued the importance of that particular character, because it's like, well, God, we've had the original Star Trek Next Generation. It's while the casts are diverse, it's always a white guy leading the show. And with Deep Space Nine, you have an African American single father, who is basically on the front lines of a post World War II situation, having to raise his son in this difficult scenario, and you get to see how he responds and is virtuous and moral and upright, and I think that's a really important it's a really important thing. It sends a really important message, and I think that's partly what, even though Shaft does, like I said, fall into that blaxploitation of sort of, exploiting certain aspects. I think because he is still a good guy, that it just becomes a really important thing for for audiences in general to experience.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right about if you were a black kid, you finally get to see yourself projected, a projection of yourself as the hero, as the man who's doing good, as the man who is saving the day. Whereas all too often you will have seen you're the crook, or you're the shoe shine, or you're the gangster, or you're the villain. And I was going to say as like a modern equivalent, although the actual character would probably predate Shaft by a couple of years. You've got Black Panther, who will have had the same message or a similar message for kids of a few years ago. And films like Shaft will have, in a much more pop culture sort of way, will have paved the way for characters like B.A. Baracus, to be the stars of that show. Because the three white guys in the A-Team, arguably he remembers them.
I do not at all. I only remember Mr. T.
if you ask somebody who was in draw me a picture of the A-Team, the first thing they're going to draw is Mr. T.
Yeah.
And I think that is in part down to this film. I don't think it's too grandiose to say that films that like Shaft that made the black guy the hero are partly responsible for that, and all credit to them.
I sort of wonder. I've not found any connection between this, but I sort of wonder if there is any connection between the character of Shaft and Hawk in the Spencer novels. Hawk is a little bit he's a little bit more gray by a lot factor, in that he's a gray character who helps Spencer out a lot. But I sort of can see a little bit of where maybe there was some influence there, particularly in that sort of Vic and Shaft relationship. I can kind of see that played around with in what Robert B. Parker was doing in the Spencer novels. But I get actually something else you meant, that kind of going back to what you were saying, is that like when you go to the gangster, Bumpy, who his daughter's been kidnapped, and he wants Shaft to find her. There's this really interesting moment where Bumpy says that basically she's not like me. She's going to go to college. And I really like that line. I like what that was implying, because it's
absolutely,
her dad's a gangster. He is he's the classic gangster, the classic bad guy. He operates in that dark world, that wicked world. But I like the fact that it's like his daughter is going to be better than him. Yeah, because she's going to go to college. She's going to have an education. She's going to have an honest life.
It does so much, that line, doesn't it? Because it not only shows that he knows what he is, and doesn't want her to be the same.
Yeah.
So it says something about him.
Yeah.
But it also says something about the lifestyle, the situation that he's in that, it's not a given that she will go the same way as he will. She can be the same as the rich white girl in the next street who will definitely go to college and make something of her life. She can be the same despite where she's come from. It does so much, that line. Yeah. And indeed, as we said before, Shaft is doing the same thing. He's not going to college, but he's bettering himself on the social ladder, which is exactly what the gangster wants, for the daughter.
Yeah.
That line does so much, and I think it's partly that. It's partly because of that line Shaft even gets involved. I think that's the whole purpose of him getting involved in the whole shebang. Yeah. I love that line. I think that's one of the best lines I've heard in a film for.
It's a good
long time. Yeah.
But I also love when Bumpy shows his true colors, because at the beginning he's like, money doesn't matter. I'll give you all the money to find my daughter and get her. And then
Yeah.
at one point, he's like, if I lose this money, I'm going to be very upset. And then he's like,
Yeah.
and then Shaft's like, I thought money doesn't matter. And he goes, money always matters.
Yeah.
And it's great because it shows Bumpy's true colors. It shows what a wicked man he is. At some point, he yes, he wants to save his daughter and he'll do anything to do it. But if he pours all the money in, but he doesn't get the return that he wants, then it's a waste of money.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, it shows that he equates money with power.
Yes.
Yes. Whereas Shaft and the PI prototype in general, or archetype, perhaps is a better word, they never have any money because they know that really money doesn't matter as much as your own honor matters and your own, to thine own self be true and all that. And that's why Marlowe's always getting ribbed about being poor. You've never earned, you'll never amount to anything. But he knows that not a single dollar is honest, or whatever it is he says. So for every dollar a man died, or something he says, doesn't he? In one of the books.
Yeah.
And I think Shaft is well in that. I love the fact that his window gets the door of his window gets smashed, but he only sort of puts some wood slats up against it instead of just getting it fixed. Because that'll come.
I guess it happens pretty quick, so it would take a while to fix it.
It happens quick, but like any other film you'd see. I mean, how long does it take Sam Spade to get Archie's name scratched off the door?
Yes.
So, I those are two great lines, and they say a lot. Well, they say almost everything about Bumpy, about what he believes and what he is all about.
Yes,
but at the same time informing him about other people, because what I said about the daughter, but also Shaft, who knows that money isn't everything.
Yeah. It's also kind of interesting that just the kind of general sort of vibe of representation, and sort of a look into Shaft's world as well. In that, at the very beginning, again during the sort of, I think it's around the big sort of 5-minute walk around during the song, he stops at a news vendor, and it's a blind guy, it's a blind white guy. Who he's chums with, he's friends with, and they have a little bit of a back and forth, which was that was quite sweet. And then later on, when Shaft is trying to get the upper hand on a couple of mafia guys who are after him, he's at a bar across the street from his house, and the bartender is a gay man who is blatantly his friend.
Yeah.
And that I mean, at the time that would have even now, like that says a lot.
It does. Yeah, it
about Shaft and the people he's hanging out with, and this sort of lack of discrimination. He's hanging out with someone who's got a disability. He's hanging out with someone who's a gay man, and there's blatantly a friendship there, because I mean there was the funny fucking line in that bar scene when Shaft takes over on the bar, so that his the barman, I can't remember his name, but the barman walks away and lets Shaft take over, and when they meet up again, the barman goes, "Oh, there's the girl over there with some groovy boobs. I think you might like her." And then he like nonchalantly says that she really liked my body and said she would like to straighten me out, but like it wouldn't work.
Straighten me out. Yeah.
And it was such a funny moment in the film, because it's like, it feels like a conversation between two genuine friends, and like there's no shame about the black guy, or not, about the gay guy being gay. It's just it's just who he is. And Shaft doesn't make a big deal. It's just a funny, very funny moment. And I like those glimpses into Shaft's life, and the people he's hanging out with. From Vic to the news guy to the bartender, he has a very interesting group of people that he associates with, without fear of I don't know, stigma or prejudice. It was
stigma, yes, and now of course we'd overplay it, wouldn't we? And it'd be just like done to death, and the point
Yes.
would be hammered home. But I agree. It's just these are glimpses into his life.
Mm.
You know, this is his day-to-day existence. You know, so we know he goes into that bar all the time because he's friends with the bar, you know, and he's known there, he's welcome there. And it's that sort of, this is just part of a man's working day, you know, that I enjoy about the scenes like this. You know, we get to know him from the people that are around him. And that's really, that's good writing, that is, you know.
Yes.
And I also liked what really, a lot of people think this is probably a boring scene, but I loved it. There's a little bit of a montage where he's trying to track down a fella, and you see what a private eye does.
Oh, I like that.
Going from shop to shop to apartment to apartment.
Yeah.
You know, that is all too often missing in films like this for me.
Yes.
You know, because they just suddenly arrive at places in lesser films than this, you know, or they're just given a name. Someone just says, "Oh, you need Marty," you know.
Yes.
And he just got. Shaft's had to work for it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think he only gets it when he gets to see Antonio Fargas. I think that's the culmination of that little montage.
Yes.
You know, and he thinks, well, I've run out of leads. Where do I go? I'll go to the word on the street guy, you know, like, and I just love all that detail of seeing him at work, you know. I think they tried to do something in A Walk Amongst the Tombstones that's similar, and it just fails completely.
Oh, yes. But no, I like that scene. That's a good scene.
It's a great scene, yeah. I think it's one of the. I mean, it's only a bit of filler, really, but it, you know, to get from one plot point to another, but it's done so well and so realistically, that it totally sells it to me.
Well, it shows the legwork, and it makes New York feel big and like a concrete jungle, because he's looking for the guy. What's his name? Is
he looking for Ben Buford?
Ben Buford. He's looking for Ben Buford.
Yeah.
And only has his name, and he goes to the apartment where he used to live. He's not there anymore. The guy, the landlord's like, he owes me 6 months rent. You know, he's jumping all over the place, and it shows. I like that it shows just how quickly you can just get lost in the concrete jungle of the city.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's hard to find people. And it's after all that, you mentioned all that stuff, then he finally talks to someone, the guy on the street, who's like, he's meant to be at this place. There's meant to be a meeting. You might find him there. You might not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because that is what a private eye would get, isn't it? That's what some police officers get from, you know. And it does shut in the face and all the rest of it, you know.
Yes.
And what I think, and it scenes like this, it's not the only one in private eye noir films, but it's the one we're talking about right now, and it reinforces what a dead-end, lonely job it is. You know, what a thankless job it is that he's doing for $50 an hour or whatever it is. You know,
I mean, $50 an hour, you know, or a day. No, $50 an hour plus.
I think it's 50 an hour.
Back in 71 he's doing all right.
Yeah, it's about $300 an hour or something he's doing.
That's doing all right. He's doing all right.
He's doing okay. Yeah.
I could live on that.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I could imagine walking around London for days on end looking for Ben Buford.
Yeah, that would be tiring.
Although I suppose you think, well, I'm getting paid anyway, but until they fire me, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like all those scenes we've been talking about that show a glimpse into Shaft's life that aren't necessarily to do with the case or are the mechanics of finding out the information that is to do with the case, all had texture and they all had realism and they all had grit.
Yes.
To this film.
Yeah. Now, something that did make me laugh. There's a scene quite early on where Shaft goes to get a cab, and the cab, he's trying to open the door, and the cab pulls away and lets some white guy get in. Now, there is an editing hiccup there.
There is an editing
where the audio says, "You white mother," and then stops. But his mouth keeps moving, and he definitely says, "You white motherfucker."
And you don't even have to be good at lip reading to know that he says it either. It's clear as day.
What I can't figure out is, because I watched this on Amazon Prime, I didn't have it on the disc. I didn't have a DVD, which I need to get. I don't know if this was like, is this an edit? I don't know where this comes in. If I were to see the film on disc, would it say mother effer, or is it just in the film? Was there a censorship that said he can't say the F word, so they didn't refilm the scene? They just very badly ADR'd it.
Well, I don't know that because I've not been able to find anything about it. I like you, I've not got the disc, the Blu-ray, DVD, whatever. So I watched it on Prime as well. And I don't know, but if it is that, I mean, it must be an error. It must be an error. But it's one of the worst. It's one of the worst bits of dubbing I've ever seen, or edits that I've ever seen. And maybe I can't think that people would have been that offended by the word, even in 1971. But
yeah, I mean, it's an R-rated film, so I'm just sort of like, what would one F-bomb do? There's not any nudity. There's hints. Well, no, that's not true. There is some nudity in there. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the rules were at the time. I don't know.
No, I don't know. And I mean, there is a bit of nudity, and there's a bit of a muted sex scene, isn't there? But
yes, yeah.
But I don't think the word motherfucker would have been necessarily that horrendous at the time.
Yeah.
I suspect that is some Puritan producer saying, we're not having this. This is outrageous. The censors won't buy it, or whatever reason he gives. But really, it's he that's offended, and what he's left with is a glaring error in the film, which, oddly enough, we remember that he said the word more than we would if we'd heard him say it.
Yes.
So things like this always backfire, in my view. They always backfire.
Or here's an idea. Here's maybe why. I don't know. Some producer or whatever probably said, you can't say that. You're gonna offend white audiences, right? I can see that happening, and then I can see the director Parks being like, "Fuck you! I'm going to keep the scene in, and people are going to read his lips and know what the fuck he said."
I could buy into that. Yeah, I could buy into that. I
don't know. I'm just making stuff up, but I'm like, eh.
Like I say, I certainly think it's a puritanical producer somewhere saying,
"Yeah,
get that filth off my screen and out of my film." And we know, don't we? We know that directors don't always do as they're told.
Yeah,
when they're told to do stuff like that, they
because it's such a blatant error that I'm like, this is weird but funny. It's a funny moment. It's a funny moment because exactly what he said.
There's no denying what he said. In fact, I'm gonna take your explanation as the truth now. I think.
I think so. I think
Park said, "Nah."
Yeah. Screw you.
And if he did, all credit to him.
I agree. Now, okay, there are a few things that I didn't like about this film. There's a lot that I like, but there's a few things I didn't like. And as we pointed out on the back of on the poster, hotter than Bond, cooler than Bullet. That first intercourse scene that just sort of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
That's meant to be with his girlfriend, who sort of comes back momentarily later on in the film. I just felt that was a little bit stupid. You don't see anything. You see very close-ups. Like there's a really awkward moment of like her hands massaging his back until she climaxes.
Yeah.
And it's basically just there to show that he's, a really good fucker.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm agreeing with, I'm going to agree with this. I know I am. Because if you're going to do it, show it, but
my problem is it's more that like, she's not a character. She's just there to be screwed and then is gone. And that's where I have the big problem with this.
To the extent
other
that,
one.
Yeah, and the other one. The other one, I think, exists only to give that line I mentioned before.
Yes.
But the first one, and I can't remember her name, the character's name. And when she comes back, the fact I can't remember the name sort of illustrates your point. I think.
Dina, is it Dina? It's either Dina. I think it's Dina.
Is it Dina? When she comes back, I briefly thought, "Who's this?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, I know."
Yeah.
It's very perfunctory to me.
Yeah,
it's done to have a sex scene, and it's done to show that he's, like you say, he's a lover. But
yeah,
the fact of the matter is, at the end of that 5-minute opening, that cop you were talking about who comes out of the shop or whatever it is says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going to get laid." And I sort of, I look at Richard Roundtree and I think, yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. It's 7:00 in the morning. Good on you, mate.
Yeah, I can believe that. You're a better man than me, sort of thing. And then, and he says it later when he's eating hot dogs with Vic.
Vic, yes.
And Vic says,
"What'd you get?" "I got laid."
"What'd you get?" And he says, "I got laid." That's enough, right? That's all I need to know. I just think that the two sex scenes, for what they are just a bit pointless.
They are. They're gratuitous, pointless. I don't care how groovy those boobs are.
All the music that's going with them. I don't care how groovy that is either. But
I just didn't need it. I didn't need it. I think there are Bond girls, and this is what this is emulating. I feel like some of the music, like the opening song and some of these scenes, are there to be Bond-esque. But there are moments where Bond, when he's getting with certain women, it feels a bit more authentic. The character feels a bit more needed and part of the plot. I mean, unless we're talking Diamonds Are Forever, in which what's her name, Lana Wood or whatever, is completely useless. But
there's cut scenes for that. She's apparently of more use. But
yes, but I think of like Diana Riggs or Honey Rider, or I don't know, others in the Bond world, and that come out at this time, that they feel just a bit more important. And it was a shame. This just felt like pure exploitation. I mean, this is where it's down. This is where the film is leaning the most into its blaxploitation.
Into its blaxploitation-ness, yeah. I mean, it's that word agency, isn't it? These two women don't have any agency, and the fact that one is black and one is white, all that, just to show that Shaft doesn't, stick to one type of woman. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
I get that the opening walking through the streets tells me everything I need to know about Shaft.
Yes, Isaac Hayes told you everything and what you needed to know.
Thanks very much, Isaac and Richard. I get the point. Yeah, I don't need to see it played out.
Hey, children.
but if you're gonna play it out, then play it out. Have the guts to follow it through, sort of thing.
Yeah, make them part of the story. Make one of those two women part of the story, or cut it
completely.
Yeah. Because there's the other woman who he stashes Ben Buford at her house.
Yeah.
And she's actually more important. I think she's a singer. I think that one might be Diane, actually.
That's Diane, I think.
Yeah, I think his girlfriend is
the other
Ellie.
One Ellie? Is it Ellie?
Ellie Moore. Yeah, Ellie. But it is really funny, that moment when Ben is at Diana's house and Ben and Shaft are arguing about something, and I can't remember what she says, but she sings a line to them. It's really, do you know what I'm talking about? She's like,
yeah, I do.
Hey, God, the kids are in the other room or something like. Yeah. I was just like, wait, what?
What are you doing?
I wish I should have wrote the line down, but I just thought, why is she singing?
Yeah, it's a weird moment. That it's a weird moment. I'm just seeing if I made a note of it, and I didn't.
No. Now I will say I don't like. I like the Shaft theme, but the other two songs I do not like.
No.
So the second song is when Shaft it's the montage when he's asking around town. But like, it just feels like Isaac Hayes is just making shit up along the way. Where he's just like, it's like he's watching he's watching the reels, and he's like, Shaft walks down the street. He's talking to a jiving cat who tells him something, and he doesn't like it, so he'll punch you in the face.
I move on.
Move on.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I love the score, but I don't like the songs. I prefer the like Lalo Schifrin type instrumentals. You know, the funky guitars and the racing bass and all that, and the drums.
Yes.
That's what I love about this score. The songs I could really take or leave.
Yeah.
The first one makes me smile.
Yes.
You know, then the lyrics are just outrageous. But
I wrote a lyric down from the third song when he's in the bar, when he's taken over for the bartender. Molly, I think, is the bartender's name. I think. Might be wrong. But the line is, again, it's like at this moment in the bar, he's there to get the better of a couple of mafia guys. Yet the lines that are being sung are, I feel like making love under the stars above. Isaac, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Like, what does this have to do with anything that's happening right now?
It's not even a good lyric anyway.
No, it just sounds like he's making stuff up on the spot, which is why I can't help but think of South Park, because obviously this came first, but South Park are clearly making fun of these three songs.
Of this.
That's what Chef is doing.
Yeah. Now, does Hayes realize that, or is he just so far gone he doesn't have a clue? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's a review here that says vulgar, shallow, and crudely done. But Shaft distinguishes itself by having the best musical score of the year. Now, I'm not sure I can. You know, those songs really do sort of impact whether I 100% agree with that or not. I would have much preferred. I could live with the opening one, but I would have much preferred the instrumental.
Yes, if we say not his song, not the songs, but the actual score, I would agree, because the score is great. I like list. I will. It's a good one. It is a good one. It
is a good one.
So that's a complicated one. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of agree, but I kind of disagree. So I'm with you there. The last thing I didn't like is part of the ending. And it's when they're in that hotel sneaking around trying to get things ready to save Bumpy's daughter. Way too long.
Yeah.
Way too long. I started to doze off.
That's one of the things that I've noted here. They could lose good few minutes of this.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is because they just runtime wise. I mean, the opening is 5 minutes of Shaft walking around town to a song.
Yeah.
The ending is like 15 minutes of just walking around a building.
Walking around hotel corridors.
You know?
Yeah.
And I sort of think, did they not have enough?
Well, possibly. I mean, what's the runtime? The runtime
hour
is
and 40.
100 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd have been quite happy with an hour and a half. I'll tell you that.
Too.
I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
You know, there's something to be said for films like this only being short.
Yeah.
And I mean, by today's standards, this is a 2-reeler.
Yes.
But you know, for its time, I think they could have lost 10 minutes of this.
Yeah.
Because really, by the time overall the plot's quite simple, isn't it? The plot is quite simple.
Yeah.
It's just how he goes about the mission for one. I mean, there's not really any mystery to this. You know, this isn't a mystery in my book. This is a mission. Maybe that's another Bond nod. You know, I don't know. But what he does is very straightforward.
Yeah.
You know, there's no sort of complex twists and turns for him to navigate. He's just got to get this band of misfits together to go and rescue her from the hotel. I mean, he's got to track down Ben, and he's got to find out where she is and all that business. So there's that sort of investigation going on.
Yeah.
But really, this is an ambush.
Yeah.
This is a hostage rescue.
Yeah.
And I don't really need to. I want to see the rescue. I don't want to see the build up to it.
Yeah. Or the build up to it needed to be way more interesting. Like the raiding of the hotel needed to be really interesting, and it just wasn't. It was
the alternative, yeah.
You know, guy was like, "Hey, bring me some coffees and some Coke with a straw."
Yeah, all that business. Yeah.
Okay.
God. Yeah, all right.
I thought that was going to be part of it. Nope.
Yeah, no, all that is really turgid. I find that really turgid.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if the idea was to have that slow build up to him crashing through the window, because when he crashes through the window, it's then like all guns blazing. Literally.
Yeah, it's like, oh, here we go, finally.
Yeah, here we go. But perversely, the climax isn't explosive enough to justify that length of build up.
No,
for me,
no.
You could cut 10 minutes of that build up and have that explosive ending that we get in 90 minutes, 95 minutes, and I'd have been I'm a much happier man. Happier.
Yeah. Because then I don't know how you feel about the ending where, Shaft goes to the phone booth and he calls Vic, and, they drop that line again of, what is it? You shit anyway, or you're shitty that you whatever.
You're gonna have to. He says that my case is bust wide open. He says, we'll close it. He says, you're gonna have to close it yourself, shitty.
Yeah, you're gonna close yourself, shitty. Kind of referencing what the woman said. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then it just ends, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. Again, sentimental me is going to come out. I would have preferred just a couple of lines, nothing major, between Shaft and Vic. A sort of, we'll take it from here. Yes,
it needed that. It needed cut down the infiltrating of the hotel so that we can have a bit of that, and maybe even a scene of Bumpy and his daughter reunited.
Yeah, returning the daughter. Yeah, returning the daughter.
That feels like a huge missed opportunity. Yeah,
and I also the laugh that Shaft gives at the end. He gives that quip, close it yourself, shitty, and hangs up with a laugh. And I think, are you in the mood for laughing right now?
Yeah, it was a bit too cavalier.
It's a bit too movie. It's what a movie character does.
Yes.
Hey, I've saved the girl. I've won the day. Great. Whereas really, he's just faced death. For goodness' sake, And
yes.
There was no guarantee that this cack-handed plan was going to work anyway. So, I think the end is like a bum note to me. It's like someone's played a fairly decent sort of piano piece and near symphony, and then it just plays a flat instead of a natural at the end. It doesn't really. It's off key.
Yes.
I would have much preferred a scene with Vic, as I say, and now you've said it. If I can't have that, then at least show me the daughter being returned to what I assume is the relative safety of her own home.
Yes.
Despite who her dad is, something like that. The end doesn't really sell for me. It doesn't land.
No.
And it's a shame because what's gone before is so good.
Yeah.
Apart from the niggles that we've raised, it's so good. But it's a shame that the last 30 seconds of it leave you with what's approaching a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
Or a disappointed taste in your mouth.
Yeah, it's true. I think overall, I think my big those are sort of like my big complaints, and I think in general, if I had one big general dislike, it does have to be the handling of the women characters throughout the whole film. The girlfriend is sorry, excuse me. The girlfriend is a bit lame. The white girl that he sleeps with. I mean, I know that's to kind of make a statement, but I don't care. She's not useful, if she was part of the story somehow, fine. But even Bumpy's daughter, there's just a little bit, and there's a lot missing from all of these women that we see throughout the film. And I think the film could have done better to make more out of them. Maybe reduce two of them into one, and make something of Bumpy's daughter. Just give her, make us care about her a little bit more, maybe.
I agree. Why is one of these girls certainly compressing them into one character would have been a way of
Ellie
saving
and
time.
Dina should have been one character. They
One
shouldn't
character,
be two.
yeah, absolutely. And somehow having her with a vested interest in what happens to Bumpy's daughter, who's Marcy, you know, so that she has some agents, so she's got an interest in what's going on, or even make her, you know, I mean, I don't know, give her a story of her own that makes her have some purpose.
Yes,
because like the worst, you've made this point really, but like the worst of the Bond girls, they're just there to be like rogered, aren't they? You know, and that really is a shame. Maybe that's a cultural thing of the time. I don't know. That there's a lot of early 70s films where women are just there to look good and be slept with.
Yeah.
But when you're being as progressive as you are by having a black lead and a fairly not necessarily important, but quite a key person to that main character as a gay man, you're being progressive already, so you can break another boundary for me.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and have a woman that means something, please.
Yeah.
Because I have no. Marcy, who is the daughter, is a MacGuffin, isn't she? I know nothing about her.
Mm-mm.
You know, she could be an absolute nightmare.
Yes,
she could be a dead end kid. And you know, but I know nothing about her, so I'm not really invested in whether she's saved or not, other than the fact, and again, this is Mrs. Movieland, I am told that she is a good girl and needs saving.
Yes.
You know,
he needed more. Maybe even if it was something like you trim a few things here and there, and one of the investigation trails is talking to a boyfriend of hers.
Yeah,
talking to a girlfriend or two of hers. Something. I mean, I think like Sugar, the show Sugar did that really well, because that film was all about him looking for a missing woman as well. But we get to know the missing girl through her social media posts. We get to know her through the conversations with her stepmom, ex-stepmom, those sorts of things.
Another great example of that is Twin Peaks, where she's not missing, but she's dead. Laura Palmer is dead.
Yeah.
But you get to know things about her from how other people in the town viewed her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some hated her, some loved her, some thought they were in love with her, some thought she was cheap. And you start to build up a picture of who so that eventually when she is revealed to you, which she is, you can make your own mind up, sort of thing. You know, and that works really well. I appreciate that's a TV series, you've got more time to breathe and what have you. But you only need a couple of short scenes. And part of the going around the city, which I do admire. I'll say it again, I do admire that. You know, one of those montage bits could easily have been, well, yeah, I do know her. She comes in here all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Just to give her a bit of depth and a bit of humanity, I suppose. But in terms of the leading ladies, for want of a better phrase, I'd either combine them and make them mean something, or dare I say, don't have them at all.
Yeah.
And I think we've said that about a film in the past. I can't remember which one, but it might have been Angels with Dirty Faces, where you just think you don't need Laurie at all.
Yeah, was that? Yes.
Was it that?
Yeah.
Just I'd rather it was an all-male cast in a way than have female characters that are meaningless.
Yes, that are just there to be slept with. It's a little bit. That's where the film doesn't age well at all.
Not at all. No, not at all. Not at all.
Before we were recording, you mentioned something about Shaft and its sort of what is it? It's staying power today. What were you saying about that?
Yeah, I was just asking whether or not you think it maintains that progressive feel all these years later. Does it? At the time it was seminal. You know, at the time it was groundbreaking. There's no denying that. Some films are that and retain their impact. Does this?
I think Because I always get annoyed when people pretend like there weren't movies before 2010 and say stupid shit like the Black Panther 2019 or 2018 or whatever year that movie came out was like the first all black movie. Because it just sort of is. To me, it's a disservice to everything that came before it.
Absolutely.
And I have to say that, like, on one end, it's worth acknowledging, and I think like what Spike Lee said, it's worth it. It's the fact that this film exists and was made in the climate that it was made in is inspirational and important. Does the film retain? Is it as, is it as progressive as what we would see things today? I think we would determine that no, it has its moments that would have been interesting at the time, but there were certain things that it could have done better with and on. So I has it retained its progressiveness? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. But it's to me, I guess it's still one that's like, yeah, it's worth acknowledging its contribution. Its contribution shouldn't be extinguished, basically.
Yeah, that's my view. I'm glad you said about people who think cinema was invented in 2010 and whatever you said. That does so much disservice, and it does disservice to people like, and he's not the only one by any means, but people like Sidney Poitier, who was absolutely revolutionary, and he's in films like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and which is where a white girl has fallen in love with Sidney Poitier, and he goes to meet her parents, who are Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, and that's all about accepting him as a man rather than seeing that he's a black man.
Mm-hmm.
Films like In the Heat of the Night with Rod Steiger, where he's a copper, Poitier's a copper, and there's a famous line, "They call me Mr. Tibbs," and someone slaps him. He's in the southern states somewhere, kind of Louisiana or wherever it is, and somebody slaps him because he's a black man, and they feel they can, and he absolutely pummels them back, and he like gives them a double slap, and I think they say, like, what do they call you, boy? And it's him, and he slaps them, and they say, "They call me Mr. Tibbs," and it's famous. And I think that we might have answered my pre-air question in the discussion, because In the Heat of the Night and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, they don't pull the punches, whereas Shaft sort of does. It's going back to what we said at the start about it just being a sprinkling of awareness about the issues that it's raising.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether that sort of dilutes its longevity. I'm not saying it does. It's a question I'm asking for as a genuine piece, out of genuine interest. Because I agree, there's absolutely no doubt this film changed things and set the path for other things to come, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
But you don't see this film necessarily wheeled out as an example of it in the same way that you do some of those Poitier films. That was really what was in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And I think it's down to the fact that they did pull some punches, rightly or wrongly. They did pull some punches that they perhaps, in retrospect, might not have wanted to.
Yes. Well, I think before we rate this, something we discussed doing is just covering a couple of user reviews of films, just sort of, but like people who are giving these films just like 1 star, not like 5 stars. Ones that stand out to us as funny. So I found a few that I thought we could see if we disagree or agree with. Here's one review, one 1-star review from back in 2021. It says, "Don't like a single thing about this movie. Way too much talking and not enough badassery from Shaft himself." Did you watch the same film?
I've picked that one out. I've also picked out this didn't have quite as many guilty pleasures as other movies of its type. Like, what are you talking about? it's fair to say that it gets a lot of. I mean, I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes. It gets a lot of good reviews, but then there are things like this. Plays like a crap 70s New York City cop show, which is basically what it is. I mean, are you kidding?
I know. Or you got this one it's a poor plot, badly acted, waste of time watching, only stayed to the end to find out what happened. If it's so bad, why did you stay till the end?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You weren't that uninvested, were you?
Oh man. And this one, probably one of the worst things to come out of the 70s. It's unwatchable, and I didn't even care for any of the music. First and only viewing.
It's unwatchable. Unwatchable.
It is. What about definitely watchable?
What about one cool ass cat in one boring ass movie?
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I wonder. I've not seen it, but I wonder if they're watching has there been a remake or something?
No,
people watching the wrong one.
I mean, there's no remakes, but there are sequels. I mean, obviously there were two sequels to this film, official sequels, but then there is the Samuel L. Jackson 2000 movie Shaft. That is as far as I understand it is continuing on from these films. And the first movie with Samuel L. Jackson, John Shaft is Samuel L. Jackson's uncle. He's called his uncle. But then there's a 2019-ish or 2018 film that's called, I can't remember, I think it might just be called Shaft again or something like that. That is like a generational film. So it's got Roundtree, Jackson, and a new young Shaft, you have the 70s Shaft, you have this 2000 Shaft, but then you have a modern day, like, contemporary sort of our era mindset Shaft.
Right.
And you have these three generations sort of clashing with their various like political and ethical and moral views of what is right and wrong and socially.
Right.
It's actually, some people didn't like it, but I thought it was fucking hilarious. I actually quite enjoyed the chaos of that of that movie. So these people aren't responding to those particular films. They're just it's just funny.
They're just missing the point. I mean, this was my favorite. This was from 2008, and bearing in mind what we've been talking about in the closing sort of sections of this show, it gets half a star. And it says, seriously, it's bad. Real bad. The one redeeming quality, I'll stress that, the one redeeming quality is that Shaft has intercourse with many women.
Wow. Oh.
And that's really as far as I could get.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. Do people intentionally miss the point, Luke? I'm a very simple soul, and I just can't believe that these people were watching the same film as me.
Well, I mean, the last one I'll leave us with is overrated. Couldn't even finish it. I feel like this is where, like, you know, I do have to laugh at the Rotten Tomatoes world, and you know, I sometimes just don't care about what the general public think about something, because I always think about that line in Men in Black where Tommy Lee Jones's character says, "A person is smart, but people are dumb."
Yeah, absolutely.
And so therefore, like, whenever these, you know, aggregated reviews and percentages are splattered everywhere, I really don't pay. I don't pay attention to them. I just find them silly. And you know, yeah, I feel like with some of these, it's like, well, I don't know if you actually know how to watch a movie.
Well, yeah,
I don't know if you know how to engage with the story. I feel like you don't.
And I certainly don't think they can, you know, people like that can't watch it objectively. I mean, it's perfectly fine to say a film is overrated, you know, but you've got to try and understand why other people sort of say that it's rated before you can. You've got to you've got to be able to make an analytical judgment of it. Is what I think.
Yes. Yes.
And because you're bored doesn't mean it's overrated. In fact, I'll go so far as to say I reckon you've missed the point.
It does come to a point where it's just sort of like, like this one, Shaft is a weak character and the film is dated, not an exciting formula. Well, I don't think you know what you're talking about.
I don't think you know what you're talking about. Shaft is not a weak character. Shaft is the opposite of a weak character.
He's an interesting, complicated character, black character written by two white guys.
Yeah.
He bangs a girl with groovy boobs.
Yeah, how much more complex can you get?
I mean, I'm sorry. The film has a line where a gay man says there's a dark-haired girl over there with groovy boobs. You'll probably like her.
Yeah. But who also says
a 4-star film.
Yeah, and she wants to straighten me out.
No, I find all this stuff hilarious. I enjoy going through and reading some of these absurd reviews for things. So I think we'll do this more often.
I think we should.
We'll dive into some of these reviews and just to sort of, as we conclude episodes, see what other people sort of generally think about. See what some of the worst reviews out there are. No matter what our view is on the.
No matter what our view is, yeah, and quite happy for people to give Shaft, for example, a 1-star review, but for the right reasons, folks.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes. Now, I guess we should probably give our rating because it's that time.
One falcon,
half a falcon. So, as everyone knows, if you don't know, we rate all of our films out of 5 falcons. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Matt, what do you rate Shaft 1971?
I'm going to give this. I toyed with giving this 3.5 falcons, because of for all the reasons that we've said, but for all the reasons we've said on the negative side of the scales. But I really think that. Because of what it was doing or trying to do, that I feel that's a little bit mean. So I'm gonna nudge it to 4 falcons. All
right, fair enough. Maybe we shouldn't be giving it falcons. Maybe we should be giving this like jive cats.
All right. In that case, 10 jive cats. No, I don't
10
know.
Jive cats.
No, I'll assuming we can only have 5 jive cats. I will still give it 4 jive cats.
All right, four jive cats. That's fair enough. My gut reaction was also to give it 3.5 falcons or 3.5 jive cats. But I think I'm going to keep it there. I think the film is it's worth watching. It's worth seeking out. It's worth recognizing its contribution to cinema. It's worth Roundtree's performance as Shaft is fantastic. A lot of the supporting cast are great. It's the female characters that are heavily underwritten. The pointless gratuitous sex that isn't even like sexy is just sort of that pulls it down quite a bit for me. I think and some of those. I think the ending with it being a little bit overly long and just sort of not getting. So I think its contribution can't be ignored. As I was saying, it's worth watching. You're gonna have fun with it, but I'm not a moron. It's not a 1-star. It's not a half a star. It's an entertaining film, and 3.5 is a good.
That's a good score.
That's a good score. I don't feel like I'm being too harsh with that. It's
no, and it's a reasoned score to give, not just half a star because whatever the reason was that person gave.
Yeah,
its only redeeming feature was the unnecessary sex scene.
Yeah, no, I mean, because it's also important to know, like, literally because of this film, the representation of sort of black men and black masculinity in film, it changed it. It changed the game.
It
and it became more normal to see, characters that would have been filled by by a white guy, now with a black lead, and that's a really important contribution to acknowledge. Also, interesting thing of note: Quentin Tarantino in 2012 at a Comic-Con panel said that Brodilla von Shaft and Django Freeman from his movie Django Unchained are intended to be the great grandparents of John Shaft and the Shaft movies. I take that as canon. I will accept this as canon.
I can accept that. Yeah, I can accept
I love Django Unchained. I think that's a fun little nod. I will accept it.
Yeah, I can accept that as well.
Well, I think we've thoroughly... what do? We investigate. That's what we do. I think we have thoroughly investigated.
I'll tell you what. It's time to close it, Shitty.
It's time to close it, Shitty.
And that wraps up our investigation. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another case. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, and be sure to take care walking down those mean streets.